it's interesting to me how people will always try to gain the power of government, wrestle a little bit of control for themselves, regardless of any thought for their fellow man, and the fact that someone else is probably paying for it. And now just multiply that and amplify that by vested interest, large corporations with big government contracts and revolving doors between big industry and government, positions and lobbying and all of that, right? So I had a customer, and I'd been fighting to get a better internet connection for a long time. We'd moved, and I went from a decent internet connection, it was at the time 50 megabytes per second, I think it was, and we moved to potato internet. It was basically it was a dial-up type connection, and so I couldn't really do anything. And I'd been trying to get better internet where I was for a long time, by petitioning my service provider. And I had a customer who was in the same boat, but it was because he was way up a mountain. It wasn't because he'd just moved to a more rural area like I live. I'm in farm country, and it's a rural road, and we just don't have the updated infrastructure. What he was doing was he was relaying an internet connection, a cable internet connection, across the valley with some kind of a microwave transmitter receiver. He was an electronics guy. He had run an electronics store for a number of years, so he knew how to do all of that. So he had been relaying this across the valley. He'd found someone who would allow him to put the microwave dish on their garage where the cable internet connection came, and then he beamed it across the valley. And he wanted fiber optic or cable directly to his home, but he wasn't going to get it. Again, he's up a mountain, right? So one day we were talking about government and an election, probably the U.S. election, because the U.S. elections get a lot of airplay around here. It's a big country, right? It's our neighbor. When the U.S. catches a cold, or when the U.S. catches the sniffles, Canada catches a cold. I don't know. Anyway, we were talking about that, and we were talking about the polarized nature of the discourse. And I was saying that, the problem is the government does too much, right? So my point was that there are too many different people who see an opportunity to wrest some lever of control or just get some plain old good old-fashioned money out of the government, and so they have a vested interest in trying to tug the government their direction. And so the more that the government is willing to do, the more people are trying to get a piece of the pie, obviously. I mean, this is very simple stuff. And so I said to him, the problem is that the government is doing too much. My point was, basically, if the government just took care of national defense and made a couple of roads, there wouldn't be an awful lot, and everything else was left to the sort of the private sector. There wouldn't be an awful lot to argue about. There also wouldn't be a whole bunch of lobbyists, and there wouldn't be a bunch of fat, sweet, juicy government contracts. It would be an actual free market. It wouldn't be this corporatocracy that we have nowadays, which allows people to bash free market capitalism, right? Bash voluntary interaction between human beings. But I digress. I always digress. And so I just said to him, the problem is the government tries to do too much, and he got fucking mad. And he says, no, the government doesn't do enough. And he was an older guy, quite a bit older than me, walking with a cane, way overweight, and starts stepping into me. And his wife is right there, and I'm thinking, am I going to have to defend myself against this old guy in my own shop, right in front of his wife? Like, what are you doing, dude? And he said, because by this point in time, my internet service provider had actually put up fiber optics. And I had announced to him, I'm finally, this was a topic every time he came to get his car serviced about whether or not I was going to get first world internet. And I had said to him a couple of times prior, finally, we're getting fiber optic. They're putting the lines in. And so when I said the government does too much, and he said, the government doesn't do enough, and he was all upset, it startled me a little bit. And he goes, you got your internet. What are you, you're fine, kind of thing. And I said, oh, are you saying you think that the government should provide you with internet? And he goes, absolutely, internet should be free. And so there you have it. And obviously nothing's free. What he really means is someone else should pay for it. That's what he wants. He wants to be able to force other people to pay for it. And he's very upset that somehow I threaten him by one man saying that, you know, the government does too much, that might somehow jeopardize his internet. So he was ready to step into me over that. I'm actually no threat to him. Anyway, let me know what you think. Thanks for watching.